Hi there, this is Matt Heffernan. Welcome back to my channel. I've got something a little different for you in this video, and you might think I've drifted away from some of my principles. Attentive viewers of this channel will no doubt be aware of my general disdain for certain technology companies, especially Microsoft. You can see that I use Linux for all my development, and as a host platform for emulation and even video streaming and production. I try to use free and open source software as much as possible for all of my personal needs, while for professional reasons I still need to run Windows and use Microsoft services that other people are paying for. I have serious problems with a lot of the ways that Microsoft and their leadership have run their businesses and affected the computer industry. But I do admit that they're not just a runaway train of corporate evil and bad software. In fact, I have a list of the top 5 really positive and cool things that Microsoft has done over the course of their existence. Let's go through them in chronological order, starting with the company's legendary creation. Everybody knows that Bill Gates was an undergrad student at Harvard when he started Microsoft, just like Mark Zuckerberg did with Facebook 30 years later. But a little less well known is his partner, the late Paul Allen, who performed a feat of technical wizardry that helped launch their fledgling company at the very beginning of the microcomputer era. Allen attended the much more democratic Washington State University, but he also dropped out to take a job with Honeywell near the Harvard campus. He reunited with Gates, his old buddy from high school in Seattle, and convinced him to drop out of Harvard to join him in a new business venture. The MIT's Altair 8800 had just been revealed to the public in Popular Electronics magazine, and Allen and Gates saw the potential that this new invention of a microcomputer could have if one could program it in something as accessible as a BASIC interpreter. They founded Microsoft as the first company dedicated to developing software for microcomputers, and their product would be Altair BASIC. Gates told MITs that they could demonstrate it when they visit their headquarters in Albuquerque in 8 weeks. Problem was, Altair BASIC didn't exist in any form yet, and they didn't have a physical Altair or even an Intel 8080 development board to work with. What they did have was an 8008 emulator that Allen had written for the DEC PDP-10 mainframe computer, which he was able to refactor into an Altair emulator based on the MIT's programming guide and nothing more. The Altair had a teletype interface just like the PDP-10, so if his emulator worked, and their 8080 BASIC interpreter worked on that via the same teletype interface, then, in theory, it should work on the actual machine when they demo it. They were able to save the interpreter code, which was less than 4 kilobytes in its entirety, onto punched paper tape using a PDP-10 peripheral, knowing that a compatible reader was already available for the Altair. Allen took that paper roll onto a plane and flew to Albuquerque for the demo after that frantic 8-week development period. On the plane, he realized that while he had a theoretically working program encoded on the tape, the Altair didn't have any kind of built-in software to read and bootstrap the program, so he coded his own bootloader on the plane, knowing that he would have to enter it using the Altair's panel switches and binary machine code. Once there in Albuquerque, in front of the actual Altair and the MIT's leadership for the first time, he entered the bootloader program and ran it, fed in the tape, and finally bootstrapped to Altair BASIC. The expected memory size input prompt was printed to the teletype, and he knew it was working. MITs agreed to distribute the software to their small but rapidly growing customer base of first-generation microcomputer enthusiasts, and Microsoft was effectively born that day in Albuquerque. Gates finally dropped out of Harvard and joined Allen there to provide support for MITs until they relocated back to the Seattle area. Gates, of course, was more interested than Allen in building a giant corporation, and Allen retired early in 1983 with his sizable share of Microsoft stock, with which he did everything from being a technology investor, buying yachts, and major sports franchises like the Seattle Seahawks, to a vast amount of philanthropic giving up until his tragic death at 65 from cancer in 2018. His bit of technological heroism in the founding of Microsoft was not repeated often, and the company became more of the monopolistic behemoth we know today, as their partnership with IBM led to their dominance of the PC software industry. This dominance, while impressive, is not particularly cool or interesting, but along the way they did manage some inspirational moments that made real improvements to the industry and our relationship with computer technology. The next moment on my list happened in 1982, right before Allen left Microsoft as a day-to-day worker. While Microsoft mainly made basic interpreters and operating systems like PC-DOS at the time, they had made a few games for different platforms, but the only game they made for the IBM PC was an example BASIC program called Donkey.Bass, which was co-written by Gates himself and was for many years the only effectively open-source software he wrote. Microsoft wanted to have a real commercial quality game that they could sell for the PC, and to create it they turned to Bruce Artwick and his company named Sublogic, who had released a flight simulator for the Apple II and later the TRS-80. A new version that could boot directly from disk on the PC and run using CGA color graphics was sold as the first version of Microsoft Flight Simulator. It became very popular, and new versions continue to be released by Microsoft to this day. But just having a successful game franchise isn't particularly interesting. What Flight Simulator 1.0 introduced was the concept of the IBM PC as an open gaming platform. As PC clones hit the market, their ability to emulate IBM's architecture was difficult to quantify, but being able to run this game successfully turned out to be an excellent indicator. If your computer could run Microsoft Flight Simulator, it could probably run any software written for the IBM PC. This was highly important not just for the clone manufacturers and the companies developing BIOS chips for them, but also for PC software publishers, who could market their products as able to run not only on IBM PCs, but on compatible systems as well. This led to a flurry of innovation in both productivity and gaming software for the PC, further asserting its dominance in the microcomputer market, which is now simply the entire computer market, with enterprise servers today being merely high-capacity PC clones, with a direct hereditary line of compatible machines going all the way back to the original IBM PC. Sure, like number 1 on my list, number 2 was hugely beneficial to Microsoft's bottom line and their ability to grow and bolster their monopoly. But it was still cool, even down to the game itself, which is really an excellent product. While Microsoft was not really a big force in gaming again until the Xbox, they did release another game that had an even bigger impact in the interim, and it wasn't developed by some esteemed wizard like Allen or Artwick. Microsoft's most popular and influential game was developed by an unpaid intern named Wes Cherry. When they were working on their third version of Windows, Microsoft knew they had a potential game changer on their hands. But the only problem was that this operating environment would not have much in the way of software available for it. Of course, they created simple programs like Notepad and Paint to ship with Windows, and they were working on Windows versions of their big productivity tools like Word, but PC gaming was still confined to MS-DOS or direct booters like Flight Simulator. To play a game on a Windows PC, a user would have to exit Windows and probably reboot. Further complicating matters was the typical PC user's complete unfamiliarity with graphical user interfaces. Sure, if they had experience with a Mac or Amiga, they might know how to use a mouse, but the mechanic of clicking and dragging was brand new to the vast majority of potential Windows users. So for Windows to be successful, Microsoft would have to keep people running it as much as possible. Young Wes noticed this too, while he was testing out Windows and getting bored clicking around the environment. Instead of studying for his finals, he wrote a version of Klondike Solitaire for Windows 3.0, with his girlfriend helping to design selectable cardback designs. He showed it to his bosses at Microsoft, who liked it enough to include it with the release, once Wes removed the boss key feature that changed the screen to some C code, and despite Gates' protestations that the game was too hard to win. Solitaire went on to destroy several person centuries of productivity, as Windows became the dominant operating environment for office computers, and workers could easily slack off by playing the simple card game while still appearing to be hard at work a good 5 years before they were likely to have the World Wide Web to fill the same niche. But in the end, Solitaire did have the effect that Microsoft intended. People kept Windows running, and more games would arrive for Windows, including a flood of casual games that provided a similar experience of idle clicking to pass the time. These same users also became less afraid of using their computer, and GUI applications became the new standard, with Windows the dominant environment. So yet again, Microsoft wins, and they sell more software and clamp down harder on the industry with monopolistic practices. And as the 90s wore on, the whole world was using computers, and almost all of them were using Microsoft software. This dominance had a further dark side beyond what Microsoft could control. Because most everybody was using the same computer platform, a PC running Windows became a big fat target for malware. To combat this, antivirus software became a required expenditure for any Windows user. Companies like McAfee and Norton charged consumers a yearly fee to keep their computers free of malware, effectively becoming their own kind of ransomware that bogs down systems with a promise of your computer not completely dying as long as they get paid. At least actual ransomware goes away when you pay off the creators. Microsoft was long aware that their users' experience was being degraded, but for over a decade they didn't do much about it. Eventually, they added a control panel to Windows that would warn you if you weren't running antivirus or a firewall, admitting that their platform was in constant danger of total collapse without third-party software. Meanwhile, Apple could boast in their marketing that Macs didn't get viruses, conveniently omitting the fact that this was due to their tiny market share and not any kind of intrinsic superiority of their platform. Microsoft started work on their own security software called Windows Defender, making it a free option that comes with Windows. Like early versions of Internet Explorer, it was vastly inferior to third-party alternatives, even free ones like AVG. But this changed over time. Now, Windows Defender is just about as capable as any other solution, making the need to pay yearly subscription fees for antivirus protection and firewalls unnecessary for most users. Additionally, it is far less intrusive on the user experience, which, wouldn't you know, helps Microsoft stay ahead of the competition from Apple, Google, and open-source operating systems like Linux. Vanquishing slightly more evil software companies is not the most honorable thing Microsoft could do to make up for their monopoly. They are still charging billions of dollars in licensing fees for software that can be easily replaced by free and open-source alternatives. And yet, they are not completely against the free software movement. In fact, they are ironically one of its greatest supporters. In 2012, Microsoft became one of the most prominent users of GitHub, where they publicly released the code for legacy software like early versions of MS-DOS and GW Basic, as well as current software like Visual Studio Code, which actually runs on non-Microsoft platforms. In 2018, Microsoft went ahead and just bought GitHub, and despite what some had feared, GitHub continues to thrive, providing a free platform for everyone in the world to collaborate on open-source software. Of course, you can use GitHub for commercial purposes, and that's where Microsoft, yet again, keeps making money. Luckily, they make enough from paid users of GitHub to support a vast and diverse world of free users who are creating and contributing to all sorts of interesting projects. So, despite all of the skullduggery and questionable choices, sluggish products, and general apathy to the dissatisfaction of their users, Microsoft can, and sometimes does, do some pretty cool things. Thanks, guys. Keep up the good work, and I hope to see more of it soon. It almost makes me want to run Windows 11. Well, almost. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and click that bell to be notified when new episodes come out. I have a lot of new tutorials and demos to show you, and even some progress on games I'm creating, so you don't want to miss out. The best way to keep up with what I'm doing and make a real contribution is to join our Patreon community, just like the people you see here. In addition to seeing videos before they go public, they get to have a real say in the direction of my channel and help me bring the best possible videos for the public to watch for free right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.